The introduction of the Chinese Empire. China has a long and rich history stretching back several millennia. As far back as the 20th century BC, the Chinese Empire does not refer to a singular dynastic power but rather several different ones, each of which held power over its many millennia of history. So here are some dynasties that form in Chinese Empire. So first is Xia Dynasty. The earliest known dynasty was the Xia Dynasty, which was in power from as early as 2070 BC before falling into obscurity around 1600 BC. Little is known about the Xia Dynasty, and it was believed to be a mythical story for many years. It serves an important role in Chinese history due to its prevalence in a number of major texts such as the Bamboo Annals and the records of the Grand Historian. Despite this, little archaeological evidence exists from this period, rendering much written information about the period unreliable. Next is the Shang Dynasty. Encompassing the period otherwise known as the Chinese Bronze Age was the Shang Dynasty. While the exact date of its ascendancy is somewhat ambiguous, it is estimated that the Shang arose around 1600 BC. Unlike the preceding Xia Dynasty, the Shang Dynasty is supported by a wealth of archaeological evidence. The dynasty was centered around the Henan province along the Yellow River. The dynasty was known for making a number of major advancements in the fields of astronomy, mathematics, and military technology. Major urban centers included Jingzhou and Anyang, the latter serving as the capital. The dynasty collapsed during the rule of Dixin, a cruel leader who lost the support of his subordinates. During the Battle of Moyi, the advancing forces of the ascendant Zhou army secured victory as Sin's followers defected and refused to fight. The king killed himself by burning his palace to the ground, leaving a power vacuum to be filled by the evading Zhou dynasty. The Zhou Dynasty. The longest living dynasty in Chinese history. The Zhou Dynasty remained in power for over 8 centuries. It is generally divided into two separate periods, the Western Zhou and the Eastern Zhou. It is considered to be among the most influential periods in Chinese history, establishing political system which would be put in place for millennia and creating a distinct cultural identity. The Zhou dynasty coexisted with the Shang dynasty for several hundred years and eventually consolidated rule over its rival and exerted control over the entirety of China. The Western Zhou was the less important of the two, peaking for about a century and declining thereafter. Little is known about the period beyond the names of its kings and general outline of events. The Zhou's movements eastwards represented the coming of the Eastern Zhou and a more illustrious period of history. Next is the Spring and Autumn period. The Eastern Zhou marked the beginning of the Iron Age in China, a major turning point in the country's history. The first period of this, spanning 771 to 476 BC, is known as the Spring and Autumn period, its name stemming from the Spring and Autumn Annals. The centralized imperial family lost its power over this period as regional duchies emerged and consolidated power. As division began to emerge, a number of important developments occurred in the fields of education and academia. Confucius and several other intellectual figures were active at this time. It was also a period which saw significant infrastructural improvements in the forms of canals and roads. The other one is the Warring States. As divisions formed, conflict became increasingly prevalent. The final years of the Zhou dynasty are better known as the Warring States period. The duchies had declared themselves kings and had begun more openly feuding with one another. Eventually, two states emerged from the conflict, the Qin and Chu dynasties, with Qin ultimately overcoming its closest rival and becoming the head of the first unified Chinese empire. Despite the period being dominated by conflict, the Warring States period also saw a number of major developments in the government systems.